Anyway, so it's all right. I'll top out or make an edit for that intro. We'll just go ahead and start. So I'm going to hide around the corner. Everybody welcome. Thank you for being here. And you go ahead and tell us about what you're doing.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about Ozark holiday foodways traditions, I believe, but I'm also going to do that while trying to make a pie. So it's a little bit like I've never cooked for a live stream. So I tried to think about it, but I don't have a staff. So I was going to think about, the pre-cooked pie that I could pull out and everything, but we're just going to do it. I think we got enough time to do it.
Yeah.
So I'll start with what I'm making, because then I'll just do that and talk.
Okay.
But I'm making a pie that I made up for my granddaddy, because every Thanksgiving, he was always cutting half a piece of sweet potato pie and half a piece of pecan pie. And he did that all the time. And late in his life, I was way into making pies, and I thought we can do better than this. So I came up with a pie that is sweet potato pie on the bottom and pecan pie on top. And I make it every Thanksgiving. And so I'm gonna make it now while we talk. I'll say that for me, Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. And I have to cook all the things. It is my favorite holiday because of the food and all the memories I have around food, and my ancestors that aren't here anymore, and all the good times that we had together as family, and all the good times I remember cooking with here we go, with the ladies in my family, and how special the holidays were because of that. It was always the time that was really stressful, but also really fun, and all the special things got pulled out. And that's an everywhere story, but it's also an Ozark story. My people were from Southeast Arkansas, and like so many in the Ozarks, this is we're doing a foodways committee that Lauren's on too, for the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, and started having our meetings. And really, I think the interesting story of the Ozarks is that it's always been an in-migration and out-migration of people, and that all of those influences build on one another. And so that's kind of my come from at this point. The women that taught me how to cook were all from Southeast Arkansas, but I've lived in the Ozarks most of my life and have had the pleasure of cooking with a lot of other women that are from here, and visiting with a lot of folks as a folklorist that's interested in foodways. So, but yeah, it's all about the ancestors for me. So I was telling Lauren, when I cook, I always have records on, and I usually have a little bit of wine. And I've got over here, I'm sure we'll put a picture up later, but a little kind of ancestor shrine of the ladies that taught me how to cook over there. So I started with roasting 3 medium-sized sweet potatoes, and was saying that the thing about roasting sweet potato is it condenses the flavor, but it also makes it super easy to peel. It just comes right off. So I did that. I already put them in the bowl.
So, okay, so who are the ladies that taught you how to cook? Since that was kind of the last thing that you mentioned. Who was that in particular?
We'll grab illustrative things. So the first thing I ever cooked was cornbread, which we'll talk about when we talk about Ozark traditions. But my great grandmother on my mother's father's side, Hallie Harden.
Let's see. I hope y'all can kind of see that. Say who that is again.
Hallie Harris Harden. Isn't that a great name?
Hallie Harris Harden, your great grandmother on your mother's side.
My mother's father's side. She was the first one that taught me how to cook. I was real little and my mom worked, and I went to work with my mom a whole lot, but a lot of times I got to stay with my nanny, and some of my best memories are at her house. But she always, when I was little, like I was like 6,
Right.
and I loved fried okra. And anytime I went to her house, she'd ask me what I wanted for supper, and I'd say fried okra, and she'd make me a big, she had a special green melamine bowl just for my fried okra. But I think, cornbread was the staple thing that you should learn how to make. And so that was the first thing she taught me, and fried okra was the second thing she taught me. And then my grandmother on my mother's side, my Mimi, Charlene Harden, taught me I learned a lot of cooking from her. I have she gave me this book with this recipes written in when I was in 5th grade. And it's got her recipes and then mine as I make them. If I decide I want to write them down, I write them in there. But
that's so special.
Yeah. But cooked a whole lot. And it was always a huge part of that relationship and love we had for each other to share those times. And I remember when Charlene, my Mimi, she ended up in her older age getting Alzheimer's, and she also had macular degeneration in both eyes, so she couldn't read and she couldn't remember a whole lot. And there were all these dishes, especially around holidays, that were just, you couldn't imagine a holiday without them. And my granddaddy, who I made this pie after, taught himself how to make all those things.
Aww.
And then when she died, I stayed there for a couple weeks and made all of those things and filled his deep freeze with them, so that he could have those. But food has always been a really important part of all of that for us.
So, what were some of those meals that were kind of the staples?
Well, thinking about the holidays, there was, in our family, there was this salad that we called the death salad as a joke, because you know how when you go to the church and somebody has a funeral or a potluck, everybody's got their dish that they bring. And my Mimi's was always this salad, Jello salad. And in the cookbook, it's called strawberry salad, but we all called it the death salad. And it was a combination of like strawberry Jello and crushed up sweetened strawberries, crushed pineapple, mashed up bananas. And there was a special crystal bowl that was associated with it.
Yeah.
And you did a layer of that, and then you let it set up, and then you put sour cream in there, and then you did another layer of the Jello salad in there.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't call it death salad, but we have a broccoli salad that has our particular bowl that it shows up every Thanksgiving. It's very important.
Right. And then of course dressing.
Yes.
And I wrote a paper one time as an undergrad on the hierarchy within a family centered around cornbread, which the pinnacle of is who's allowed to make the dressing, right? Like,
yes.
Like that's a thing.
Okay, so who made the dressing growing up when you were growing up?
Mimi made it. Somewhere in my 20s, I got to make it some. My mom made it some. But Mimi's dressing is what everyone aspired to, and it was her mother's recipe.
Right.
And so the recipe that we all used was her mother, whose name was Anime Case.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Okay, so what would happen? I mean, I guess I want your take on, what's the main key differences? I'm sure people know, but between like stuffing, dressing, what goes into dressing,
Well,
when you make it.
it's a bread versus cornbread thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've never known anybody put nuts in a dressing, right?
No,
like
me
or cranberries or anything like that. Like it's pretty staple. Like you have a lot of onion. If it's good, a lot of sage. Yeah, and we use biscuits in ours. I think there's like a dozen eggs and 8 cans of pet milk. Celery. In ours. There was always a conversation, and Mom would make for my granddaddy, because Mimi would always make chicken and dressing. It was never just dressing. It was always chicken and dressing.
Mm-hmm.
And but my granddaddy, who grew up a sharecropper and with an outhouse, would not eat poultry because he would say he had seen where the chickens ate his whole life. And he wasn't gonna eat chicken and dressing. So she would always make him ham dressing. So he would have a special batch that was kind of just for him.
Were fine.
Which is really kind of ironic, right?
That's
Because they just roll in the stuff rather than eat it. I don't know.
Pretty big irony, but I can understand.
Yeah.
Getting,
Yeah, but that would be the main difference, would be the cornbread versus bread.
Right.
Although our dressing had biscuits in it.
Yeah, no, my family doesn't. We do just cornbread. And it's, it's a long, like you're making cornbread for a few weeks, freezing it ahead of time, right?
Well, no, I do it fresh. I do the cornbread fresh. I do the biscuits fresh, actually, but then I mix it all up and I leave it to set at least 2 days before I bake it. So you'll see like different than some sweet potato or pumpkin pie. This is pretty thick because what we're going to do is kind of pre-cook it enough where it sets up and gets firm before we do the pecan pie filling, which is really runny on top, and you want it to have those distinct layers. So the bottom in this recipe is pretty thick. I cheated today, y'all. It kind of goes against everything. I've ventured on entering pie contests, and I would never in a million years to a family gathering or a contest take a pre-made crust, but for the sake of time, we're doing pre-made crust today.
So, okay, so who did teach you about baking and pies? How'd you get to the? I mean, because I consider you like a master pie smith. I just made that term up. But
I want that calling card now.
Yeah. So I don't know. You've won some. Have you won some contests? What contests did you?
I have. I won the Fox pie contest, and then I've won every pie contest I've entered. But it's a new thing that I have this dream to win all the pie contests up to the state fair. So I won also the Arkansas Pie Festival Best Overall, and I won the County Fair King Arthur Flour Bake Off, which included more than just pies, but they didn't have a special category for pies. But I was not able to, because my schedule was such, I wasn't able to get the pie that I'm trying to do one pie each year and see how far I can take it. And I wasn't able to get down to Little Rock to the state fair to get the pie in there this year.
So what pie was it that won these contests? Was this all last year then?
Well, the Fox one was pre-COVID.
Okay.
And it was a blueberry pie. I have pie visions. And so I had this vision of this pie that was a local blueberry pie, but it had stars. It was a 4th of July event. I had stars cut out to make the top crust, and then I braided a ring around and used food color and painted it kind of red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
And it was that. But the pie that I've been trying to ride all the way out is one I made up for my hero, Wendell Berry.
Yeah.
And I call it an Arkansas Pride apple pie. And ideally, it uses Arkansas black apples, which is a whole conversation on which apples to use. But backup apples are Granny Smiths for me. But for that pie, it's a brown butter. So I brown the butter, which makes it really nutty. And yeah, that's the pie. I'm like, if I can win all the contests with the apple pie, I'm doing pretty good.
What other pies have you kind of created and made up? So you got this one, which is a fusion of pecan and sweet potato.
Mm-hmm.
You got the apple. What else?
I just kind of adapt. I love to read cookbooks and then take them and adapt them. And it's challenging to do that with baking because, like we mentioned, it's science, so it's a little hit or miss. But I usually put a spin on a little bit of everything. So I make a spiced cheesecake that I came up with a ginger snap crust and a persimmon glaze on it.
Oh, that sounds so good.
And I do that every Thanksgiving. That's not a family recipe, but I try to do it every Thanksgiving. And because of the time of year when persimmons, when we talk about Ozarks stuff, a lot of it has to do with what's available. So I'm putting full on the edge because we're just gonna half bake this and we still gotta bake the pecan part.
Yeah. Okay. So, I wonder if you can just tell, I guess, what do you consider things to expect at Thanksgiving and Christmas? And we're closest to Thanksgiving, so I mean, you can focus on that if you want. But Thanksgiving and Christmas in the Ozarks, sort of like what do we do that whether other regions do it or not as well doesn't matter. Just kind of what to expect, and then what is unique at your home and your family stuff.
Well, my boys pretty much still eat just rolls and mashed potatoes. So I make all the things anyway, because like I said, it's getting down with my ancestors. And so frequently for me, with the work that I do, that ends up being a community dinner because I can't not make all the things. I have to make all the things.
So what are all the things?
We always did a ham instead of a turkey. And the ham was had cocoa and brown sugar on it. Mm-hmm. Have to do that. Have to do dressing. Have to do the death salad. Have to do the pies.
What pies specifically?
Well, I do this pie. I do the cheesecake. Mm-hmm. And that's it, because those were separate things. These two were separate things, and that was basically your holiday pies. Now, my Mimi made a bunch of candy. So when we come to Christmas time, I've got to make divinity. I've got to make coconut balls. Mm-hmm. And I've got to make, she made these cookies called triple cookies, and we all fought over them. And like looking at it now, I don't know how she kept us all in triple cookies like she did, because we would eat a dozen apiece within a couple of hours, all the cousins and everybody. But they're basically a chocolate chip cookie with pecans, and then they had maraschino cherries in the center of them, so they're very festive. But it was one of those one time a year things, and so like thinking about, that's what I was thinking today about Ozark in general, but especially around holidays, you really got to show out, because so much of, there's the saying, use it up or wear it out, make do or do without. And that's the Ozark way. And so much of the stuff you had to get depending on what you could find.
Right.
We were pretty isolated. So I love hearing stories. I don't know if you ever met Ethel Simpson. She was the person responsible at Special Collections for getting me able to work with Parlor. And,
okay, yeah.
And she's a historian of Northwest Arkansas and just a super cool lady. But I used to make her every year because she told me this story about her family waiting for the train. At Christmas, the train would come and they would bring things that they never got the rest of the year, like oranges or whatever. But for her, her memory was a coconut. And every year her family would make blue coconut. They would get coconut that one time a year and they'd dye it blue.
Yeah.
And then they'd put it on everything. And so every year I would make her a big batch of blue coconut for Christmas.
I love that.
But, first we should acknowledge that I'm on right now, Osage land, cooking right now. There are all these traditions associated with us throughout the generations and the newer populations that are coming in now. But a lot of it had to do with things that could be foraged. So if you think about this time of year, if you think about fall and into winter, we're talking about chinkapin, chestnuts, we're talking about hickory nuts, we're talking about acorns, people making bread out of acorns, persimmons, all of these. We just got out of kind of pawpaw time. And so a lot of things would focus on that. I just used a bunch of corn syrup. This would have been sorghum because we wouldn't have had corn syrup back then. And I've made this pie with sorghum. It's all right. It's a little much for what
that's a lot of sorghum
palate is used to. But yeah.
So do you do at Thanksgiving or Christmas, like the green bean casserole, sweet potato casserole, anything with corn? What are the side items?
Well, we did, of course, a lot of things that were associated with church potlucks. But of course, the potato casserole with cornflakes on the top.
Yes.
And the cheese.
Oh, that's good.
Good founder on that. Our family, it was kind of a funny, not bone of contention, but people got picked on for their broccoli cheese casserole. Like, that was a thing. So there were the things that you really look forward to, and then the things, sausage balls. We always had sausage balls, which would probably be something from kind of mid-century, because it's just sausage and Bisquick and cheese, it's really good. But some of those recipes, the candy recipes in particular, were pretty old and been passed down.
You guys do, we do peanut brittle. My family has lived in Izzard County area for many generations. So I'm interested in the similarities and differences too. And anybody that's listening in, y'all feel free to chime in or chat if you want to talk with us about like what you guys had that we're not mentioning at Thanksgiving or Christmas, especially if you're from the Ozarks, but even if you're not, it don't matter. But yeah, we have this sweet potato casserole that has the little tiny marshmallows on it, and then I started making more from scratch green bean casserole. So I make my own cream of and use fresh mushrooms and stuff, and now that's my job, is one of my things that I've got to do.
I've done that too with making the from scratch version and things like. And I think about the women that taught me to cook, and I had ex-mother-in-law too that was much older she was essentially the same age as my grandmother. But when I bake, I make everything from scratch, usually cakes and everything. And she looked at me one day and she was like, I don't know why in the world you would choose to make a cake from scratch, because it was such a revelation when you think about all the things that people had to do in their daily lives, and the lack of convenience. The day a box cake mix came out, it was just like, and so
that's a good point.
The generations, even though it might be 2 generations removed, that taught me how to cook or whatever, those conveniences were just life altering, really. But it is fun to kind of go backward from that now that we have other conveniences and we can make our own cream of mushroom or whatever. Yeah. It's so much better. You can make it with shiitakes. You can, you know what I mean? It's really fun.
Okay, so what? Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about pies and baking. So, what's your favorite pie to make, and what's your favorite pie to eat? And okay. I mean, it might be different. I don't know.
This is a question I also ask men in the vetting process of dating. What is your favorite pie? Because it's a personality test, right? Like, but for me, I love to eat a good coconut cream pie.
Yes.
And I don't know why particularly. I don't like coconut otherwise necessarily. Like, it's not something I seek out except in pie. And I haven't really unpacked all of that. My favorite pie to make right now, it changes over time. But my favorite pie to make is this one that's it's a Mexican chocolate cake or pie.
Yeah.
And it's got a ginger snap crust, so like a graham cracker crust, but made with ginger snaps. And then it uses, makes, I think because it's so magic, it uses black ganache or chocolate ganache, which if you don't know chocolate ganache, it's the world's most magic ingredient. You take a bag of really good chocolate chips. I use the Ghirardelli ones or Schaffenberger, and you pour 1 cup of hot, heavy cream on it, and you let it sit for 5 minutes. And then you just take a whisk and do this, and then you just pour it in the thing, and it's going to be the best tasting.
Oh, that sounds good.
But with the Mexican chocolate, it's got cinnamon in it, and it's got cayenne.
Yeah. And
then I make a cinnamon whipped cream on top of that.
Oh my gosh, that sounds delicious.
It's so simple, and it's so good.
Okay, so
do that.
Brandy Rinks says, I'm from Northeast Arkansas, and my grandma always made Mississippi mud cake that was chocolate cake with marshmallow fluff and chocolate icing on top with lots of pecans. So sweet. We usually had chocolate gravy on Christmas Eve for breakfast. Okay, so I've got gravy and biscuits on my list of things to talk about, and cornbread. So, like all things bread. Let's start with biscuits and gravy. What's key to a good biscuit?
Well, admittedly, and I've had to admit this as recently as the gathering that you came to like a month ago. I don't know what it is. I've got some sort of mental block where my biscuits are never what I want them to be when I make them from scratch. So I frequently use the pre-frozen biscuits because they're better than anything I'm ever gonna make. I will do it and they'll be fine, especially with gravy on them, but they're not ever. Mine end up being too crunchy on the outside.
Okay, so
I don't like that in a biscuit.
Our audience needs to tell us about biscuits.
Tell us your biscuit tricks.
I know I've got a handwritten recipe for my dad's mom, my granny, about biscuits, and my mom, who's in her early 60s, she just now really feels like she's mastered biscuits. She's been watching somebody from Appalachia online.
I'll tell you a secret I learned on my pie crust, though, that has changed my life, is to use a tablespoon of cornstarch in your dry mix on your pie dough, it makes it act right every time. I also make a little bit of, for my liquid, instead of just ice water, I make a buttermilk out of milk and apple cider vinegar and use that. And it also helps with like flakiness, but it gives it a little tang. It's not good for everything. It's not good on a savory pie like a chicken pot pie or anything, but on an apple pie, that's the way to go. But that cornstarch works every time. I just roll right out and roll right up and roll right out. Every time. But I am really good at gravy. So I can make the frozen biscuits and I can make any kind of gravy anybody ever wanted. But and my mom, who's on here, actually is the one that taught me how to make gravy. And she did different gravies, a water gravy, which would be
Sharecropper gravy.
Sharecropper or Ozark gravy. So you took your fat, bacon fat or whatever, and browned your flour and made a roux, and then you just used water because you might not have milk. It's really good on rice, those sorts of things, or any kind of game. That's the other thing about holiday food in the Ozarks is you're always gonna have wild game. You're gonna have wild turkey. You're gonna have deer. Again, going back to those things that are around.
Yeah, I feel like the real key to good gravy is spending time on the roux and making sure that it's it's brown enough and it's
You got to get a good sauce on it.
Yeah,
You got to get it bubbly.
right.
And get it a good kind of golden brown color, and then you can add your milk or your water or your broth or whatever to it.
So what about chocolate gravy? Are you guys fans of chocolate? We don't really do chocolate gravy a lot at my house, but
we didn't do it at our house, and it took me a while to come around to even acknowledging chocolate gravy. Like I'm aware it's a thing, but
I don't really like
it doesn't feel very.
But now chocolate rolls, that's a different
thing.
That's Searcy County, right?
That's a Searcy County thing. So if you don't know what a Searcy County chocolate roll is, and honestly, I don't care for them very much, but I have had them every time I see one. I just had a new one, and I have a ranking, but I always want them to taste more like chocolate fried pies than they do. But a traditional Ozark thing, traditional Southern thing is to take your leftover pie crust that you got after you cut your edges off and not waste it.
Right.
And a lot of people put cinnamon and sugar on it and bake it and make it a thing. This is a Searcy County chocolate roll is essentially the same thing, but you use cocoa powder and sugar and you roll it up and then you do it. And it's always a little bit gritty. I don't want in my chocolate.
Yeah. See, we do, I don't know where this came from, but my family does, would you use frozen or canned biscuits or I guess homemade? I don't know if homemade would work as good, but where you just basically make chocolate gravy without the flour and then cook biscuits with that on top of it. And that's very good.
Well, I have had something called chocolate cobbler. It's similar to
like
that, except you use self-rising flour and make a little batter out of that and just pour it on the dry cocoa ingredients.
Oh, okay. So Steph says sausage gravy was the first thing I learned to make from my mom, who's from the Arkansas Delta. Yeah, I think we have a lot of like overlapping food traditions in Arkansas, and sometimes it makes me sad how much the regions seem to be divided. But yeah, so I like sausage gravy. I tend to like gravy better that's just made with like bacon grease without sausage in it. But sausage gravy is really good too. Do you have Like that's what
I like
I
both.
like. Just how did you learn to make it?
I like
Type things almost.
I like well, I learned to make it first without sausage, but I like sausage gravy with a side of bacon.
Yes.
Or then there's like Stovies that has bacon in their sausage gravy. Have you ever had that?
I don't think I've had
In
that.
Conway.
But I would sound
Pretty
pretty
good.
good.
Pretty good.
So what's the difference between okay, you gave a crust tip. Let me go back to pies. We're kind of all over the place with our conversation, but I think that's okay. Are there any other tricks for maybe like creating a pie, making a pie, maybe a meringue trick? I don't know,
Oh, yeah.
anything like that.
Yeah, for sure. As mentioned before, I have pie vision. So to have a pie vision, all I know to do is tell you to go to the shower. I usually have pie visions in the shower. And I'll see a pie and I'll be like, oh, I gotta make that. But for meringue, I always put a little bit of cream and tartar in there. Makes it hold together better. And also you want to make sure that you spread the meringue out where it's touching the side of the crust so it doesn't shrink in the middle and pull away from the sides of the crust.
Okay.
Those would be my 2 tips on meringue.
Good
And
tips.
always like at least 2 to 3 extra egg whites because you just want it to be extra because most people don't like to really eat the meringue. It's all about the presentation. And
Calf
so
slop.
calf slobber, that's what we called it in our family. Why not just really make it? And I use the back of a just regular spoon to make my little things.
It's almost like hair. The bigger, the prettier.
I can't. Closer to God.
That's right. No, but that's true for sure. Meringue, the bigger the better, kind of. I think you're right.
Mhm.
Okay, so cornbread. I feel like for me, some of the key Ozark meals would be, biscuits and gravy, beans and cornbread. So what about beans and cornbread? Is your cornbread sweet?
No.
That's the fried,
No.
in my opinion.
Did you give me that stool over there? No, absolutely not. And in fact, my granddaddy that this pie was made for would say, if I wanted cake, I'd ask for a cake.
Yeah.
And so, no, I don't know, Mom, like, I know that it was at least a great grandmother, but did it go beyond before that, the recipe that we use on the cornbread?
Cornbread came from the recipe that our family used. We had 2. One was from mother's side of the family, and it was her great great aunt. And then the one that Nanny passed down had more soda in it than anybody's. I don't know where that originated, but I would assume probably with Nanny Harden's mother.
Okay, Big Mama.
Yeah, big mama, big fat mama.
Yeah, there's 2 teaspoons of baking soda in that recipe.
Okay.
And so there's baking powder and there's baking soda. There's no egg and there's no sugar.
No egg.
No egg.
Oat bread.
Yeah, it's got buttermilk in it.
Yeah.
And that activates with the other. And also we do, you make a crust. You put bacon grease in there and sprinkle that with cornmeal.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that until it's brown, which is my favorite smell in the whole world. And then you pour that batter in there and then you cook it about 3/4 of the way done. And then you put a plate on it and you flip it and you slide it back in the skillet so it makes that crust on both sides.
Wow.
And it took me at least 10 years of trying real hard before I could get that flip just right. Every once in a while I still messed up, but that was the distinguishing factor in who was the the matriarch of the family who could do the flip right.
I feel like I've got like a new challenge in life
cornbread.
that I need to meet, which is flip the cornbread halfway.
Yeah, and then you can
Wow.
flip it again on the plate, and it looks the same on both sides. Like if you can pull that off, then
Well, and then you got
You're the
all
queen.
the best part of the crust. is
yes,
all over it.
yeah. And I don't know about your
Oh my
family,
gosh.
but it was always, and to this day, I crave it as a dessert. And again, this goes back to the make and do, but it was one of my favorite desserts to take that leftover cornbread from supper and crumble it up in sweet milk and have that as my dessert.
Cornbread and honey. Wait, that. And then, of course, we had my grandpa would put cornbread and buttermilk with pepper and eat that. And that was like dessert, even though that anything sweet about that. That was something that was kind of his holdover for dessert. So,
And you talked about beans,
yeah. what
and then
about
there's also chicken and dumplings.
chicken and dumplings?
it's
is
that time of
definitely
year.
a good regional one. What goes in chicken and dumplings for you?
I just made a baby. I've got some in the fridge right now. I made the other night. I have a special board just for my dumplings. That's how much I love dumplings.
Did you inherit it?
No, I'll go get it. It
Yeah.
was made by Joe Doster.
He's a regional folk artist.
Yeah. Look at this dude. It also is what I use for pie crust because it's big. It's bigger than
Oh wow! Yeah.
But yeah, unlike pie crust and unlike cornbread,
Might need to lift that up. It's real big. Yeah, that's so pretty too.
and it's all Ozark hardwoods.
Oh, nice.
But unlike pie crust and cornbread, I do put egg in my dumpling dough.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just flour and salt and egg, basically, and some heavy cream. And then I make a roux, like I boil a chicken, and I take the broth off that, and then I debone the chicken, and then I throw everything back in there, and I make more broth that I put up. I always get at least 2 runs of broth off of chicken. But yeah, I use that and then put the chicken in there and roll those dumplings out. I cut my dumplings and add a little bit of flour that thickens it up. And yeah, I think that's it. Some butter. Usually just stick a butter in there because that's never going to go wrong.
Does anybody put anything besides chicken and dumplings and the broth and all that in the chicken and dumplings that's from the South or from Arkansas? I'm curious. My husband's family is from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and they put vegetables in their chicken and dumplings. And I've just come to terms with that it's just two different things.
Yeah.
Right. And that theirs is fine, but it's not. It's not chicken and dumplings. It's, I don't know, whatever it is.
I had
their version of it.
I had a very brief stint where I was vegetarian. I was living in Fayetteville, and I remember my Mimi and Granddaddy coming to visit. Like the family came for Thanksgiving at my house, and I was vegetarian. And so I attempted to make. I love Thanksgiving. So I tried to do everything that we normally have, but do a vegetarian version of it. I've also done a whole Thanksgiving wood stove, like not a wood cook stove, wood stove.
Wow.
But yeah, I made some vegetarian dumplings with veggie broth and a bunch of veggies. And
How'd that go?
I didn't get disowned. It ate, but like it was definitely not.
It didn't hit all the Thanksgiving boxes. Check all.
I could do death salad.
Yes.
I could do the death salad without. And we use that like a cranberry sauce instead of cranberry sauce. That's how that salad was used, kind of.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's a good plan. Okay, so we got, we're at like 3:50. So I can come back and ask a couple more food questions, but I thought I might give you a little bit of a chance to talk about some of the stuff that you've been doing at Meadowcreek and talk a little bit about the People's Library.
Okay.
Because I think both of those are just such important community places and
Yeah.
important community activism and stuff. So yeah.
Well, Meadowcreek, for those of you who don't know, is a 1,600-acre nature preserve that was founded in 1979 as a funded experiment in a totally sustainable community. It worked with University of Kansas Architecture School and a lot of thought leaders around alternative energy stuff. And they built a variety of buildings, including a steam-powered lumber mill and wood shop, 2 dormitories, a big conference center, several homes. It's in Fox, Arkansas. It's absolutely gorgeous. I can't refer to it as anything other than the magical forest because it's just what I feel like it is. Again, it's Osage land, and it's been pretty undeveloped. The valley, there was a railroad line that was near here in Arlberg, and a community cannery that was there, an orphanage, all built out of native stone. There's lots of rock structures around the existing property that were done during the Civil War by a group of women stonemasons, which I think is really cool. It's just a really special place. And I came here from Fayetteville about 3.5 years ago now, after it was an interesting way that I ended up here, but I had years before I was organizing food producers and artisans in Missouri, and I was in grad school, and I was a public folklorist, and I kept wondering about what a different way to do things were. I wasn't really into the idea of identifying somebody in a community and saying they're special and putting them on a stage once a year and maybe putting up an exhibit and maybe writing about them and then kind of being done based on a grant cycle. So I started thinking about what a different way would be. And I took an environmental history class, and that kind of changed my whole life. I read this book called Sand County Almanac, and there's a chapter in that book called Land Ethic that's really great. That's about the interdependence of people and the place. And I got to thinking about, what if we applied that to culture? Like, what if we thought about it that way? I think that might be a good model for me. So I started trying to figure out what that would look like. And in my research, I found out about Meadowcreek. And so I started asking questions and visiting with people, and ended up hosting a retreat out here for 4 years, where I brought people from all over the country, from everything from restoration biology to filmmakers, to folklorists, to preachers, to people that were looking at this connection between people and place. And I had no idea that I would ever get a phone call one day that was like, years later, why don't you move to Meadowcreek? But it was an immediate, why don't I? And so I came out here about 3.5 years ago with the intention of taking all the things I've learned all over, working on that model and all the networks I built, and bringing it back here. This is the county where I grew up, and I'd been wanting to move home and do the thing for a long time, and this is the perfect place to do that. And it just has all kind of lined up. So we've been doing cultural programs, the first of which was the People's Library. And one of the first events we actually had at the People's Library was a big community Thanksgiving meal. Yeah. In this work, I've learned that if you have food and music, you can bring all kinds of people together that might not otherwise sit together and talk about things that they might not otherwise talk about. Yeah. So I try to have music and food at all the things that I do. Since then, the library's still going. we're doing community scholars with y'all right
Yes,
now,
yes.
training, which is awesome. And then we started a artist in residency program, and we're kind of working towards our third year of that as an experiment, allowing it to be co-created with artists to figure out, there's not a set thing or time or any of that. It's a co-creative process.
So artists can come and stay at the lodge at Meadowcreek. Is that how that works?
They can stay at the lodge, or we had a house that was designated as a residency house, or they might come for some artists have come and stayed a week at a time, over a series or a chunk of time. Some people come alternating weekends, really just how it works with their schedule. But the main thing has been working with artists that we know will fall in love with this place,
Right.
and artists that we know have that sensibility that this place will inspire their work.
Yeah.
And there's no desire to tell them what that looks like or any of that. It's just it's the matchmaking thing. Like, we've got this space, we've got several artists that are on tour or on the road, and they're from the Ozarks, and they're off like in this crazy whirlwind. And when they get back, it's really nice to have 1,600 acres in the woods where you're not famous, where you can just sit and listen to the pretty water and do whatever you want to do.
Right.
Even if that's sleep. It's gonna help. So anyway, but we also have had textile artists and other different kinds of visual artists as part of that, writers, healers and naturalists. Brandon was one of in our first round of artists in residence.
Yeah. Brandon Weston, who's a Ozark healer and naturalist.
Yeah. And he did this really great project where he would come out here and walk trails and walk. So the residency kind of focuses on one big thing that stays at Meadowcreek, and then a small thing that can circulate through the people's library, because we don't just have books, we've got art and overalls and tools and different things that people can check out. But his was, he walked these paths and he did these hand-drawn maps and mapped his kind of experiences, also the plants that he encountered and their purposes and all that sort of thing. And then he did his big thing was to do a healing ritual over time from Osage populations through today, which is a huge undertaking. But he did a performative ritual around that was completely private. Like it was, but and then did a chapbook with the hand-drawn maps and signets and different things associated with that experience.
Wow.
That can circulate through the people's library. So those are the kinds of things that we do. And then we've been doing programming. So this was our third year of rolling out a concert in the barn series.
Yes.
We have a historic barn, and we've been doing concerts in there. And everything's been building. So in some ways it's still in a pilot stage, but it's grown every year and got a little tighter too. But we did a 3-day fiddlers gathering last year. We expanded that to an old time gathering this year that had craft and music and looked at things in addition to fiddle.
That was really cool. There, the crafts. Okay, so the old time gathering, it was the old time for all with none of the bull. I'm not
all the old time and none of the bull.
All the old time and none of the bull. And there was here, I'll move where I can. There was at that gathering they had somebody who was doing like chair caning. There was a painter that went out and they did watercolor painting in the woods. There was an old time log pull. There was a bitters workshop. They roasted acorns or chestnuts. I guess it was chestnuts. There's a ballad off. There's all sorts of stuff that was happening at the Old Time Festival. I just thought that was the really, really a cool event. really special. I was just there for the one day, but it was really neat.
I thought it was really special too. And really it was thinking about, just, I'm also a fiddler, and I also grew up in Stone County. And so just thinking about the people I know in all those worlds of folklore and music and Stone County stuff and back to the Landers, and like, it really was like, let's throw a party for us. And also it was a safe space festival, which we don't have anywhere near our region, where people can know that they'll show up and there won't be rebel flags or they won't feel othered. And part of that was conversations with old time musicians, many of which at this point self-identify as queer and are the ones that are carrying the traditions on more than anybody. So like, we need to create those spaces where everybody's welcome, which is a big part of all my work. But it was really special for me to be able to do it here, and it worked out really good. So hopefully we'll be able to do it again next year. And we got funding also for next year to do, and along these lines, an Arkansas string band and country blues festival.
Oh, nice.
Because string band is a white tradition, country blues is Black tradition, but the instrumentation is almost identical and the repertoire is shared. So the thought is, in deconstructing this otherness, if we can simply share space on a stage where those commonalities are what are highlighted and lifted up, there's so much power that comes from that. That doesn't have to be a lecture, or like, I think it'll just like click for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. So what do we got left on the pause?
It looks like about probably another 15-20 minutes.
Okay, so think about what I was going to ask that I didn't write down just a second ago. So got all these events at Meadowcreek, got the People's Library. There's something else that you've been
Smithsonian.
Oh yeah, well, I think maybe that's what it was. I don't know. So we know that the Ozarks region is the feature of the 2023 Smithsonian Folklife Festival, which is next summer in DC. You're involved all over the place with that. How did you get into that position, and what little bit can you share about? I know it's super early and we can't talk about a lot of it, but
yeah. Well, I don't think we need to talk about a bunch of specifics, but Lordy, it was like September of last year, and I don't remember who sent me the initial kind of talk, but I remember getting that email and just like tearing up because the opportunity to be involved in it, but more than that, as somebody that cares about the Ozarks and Ozarks culture and telling those stories and helping people tell their own stories so much, the immediate realization was, oh my God, like this is the chance that heretofore, we haven't had, because the story and narrative of the Ozarks has been pretty portrayed in a pretty homogenous way by a pretty homogenous group of people. And that's never been the case. And so knowing that you have an institution like the Smithsonian behind it, it can't be that. So no matter how it shakes out, like, it's not going to be that. It's not going to be the same story that's what's been shared for whatever reasons throughout time. So it'll be a more inclusive representation of who we have been and who we are, which is really wonderful to me.
Yeah.
And that can be told through craft, that can be told through music and dance, that can be told through foodways, that can be told through narratives. And it's just, it's been really fun, even though we're nowhere near whittling it down to who that core group is, to think about what that party bus is that really represents the Ozarks, and having 2 weeks to share that with people that may or may not have ever encountered the Ozarks before, or thought of that word,
or only really encountered it through like a Netflix series or something.
Oh God,
right?
yes. Right.
So I feel like I hopefully this is fun, that I know gardening is a part of foodways, and what we're thinking about gardening and gardening traditions and plants as part of food foodways. So I'm wondering, what part of gardening, where does gardening fall in your own life? How does that side of foodways, where you're growing food and you're preserving it in your own home, or what was that like? What's that?
So my relationship with gardening has been interesting. So I come from sharecroppers, you know, and Nanny, Hallie Harris Harden, that's sitting there in front of us. A lot of my memories about her being young, she had a beautiful big garden, and I remember shelling purple peas and you know, like all those things. But my grandparents in my lifetime did not garden. My mother grows beautiful flowers and plants, but she never had a vegetable garden that I recall. And then I, you know, essentially became a back to the lander and lived on what I refer to as my first commune that wasn't a commune. Yeah. This one's my second. It's not a commune. Everybody wants to call it a commune, but it's not. We have our own space, and it's way different than a commune, but it is an intentional community. Yeah. And I lived in Fayetteville up on Markham Hill before it became a barn with a chandelier and a big fountain. And anyway, we had a giant communal garden, and a lot of the people that I lived with on that property were really great gardeners, and it was very important to them. And so I learned a lot from them and did it there, and had chickens and had all the things. And then when I moved to Missouri, had a garden. It was just always kind of a part of what I did. And I enjoyed the time and the activity, and I'm real process driven. Right. So even though it's not, you know, it never provided the like produce for my whole family, I enjoyed doing it. Yeah. And I always had something, and I always was thoughtful kind of in that. But when I came out here to Meadowcreek, it's in a Ozarky River Valley. So we're in a big bowl with 100-year-old trees around us. And I mean, that is a whole nother level. That is a whole nother level of knowledge that takes decades to learn. And I'm lucky that there are people who live in this valley that have that. And so you came to visit me. It takes a lot of time. And you came to visit me during COVID. Yeah. And I was determined, you know, like the sky was falling, like we're gonna start. We're gonna figure this out right now. And I wanted to figure it out without taking any trees down, which probably, you know, was not what the wizened Ozarkers in this valley, they would have said, well, Rachel, you gotta take those 5 trees down. I was like, no. But did it that year, but would never, in a world where, you know, I'm a single mother, I work full time, play music, like I do all these things. Like there's no space to devote that amount of time to it for me as a person right now. So now, since the COVID garden, I will stick things in pots. So like and they're usually, I invest my time in things that I can't readily get. So like Thai basil, I love to cook Thai food, and Thai basil is really hard to find. I can order a jar of curry paste or whatever, but like lemongrass, there's other women in the valley that grow lemongrass. But yeah, I just kind of spend my time on those things that I want to cook with that I can't get access to.
So there is a larger community garden here at Meadowcreek, though. I know it's Tim and Eliza that run it, but you want to tell about how many people are fed through that food bank and how that works?
Yeah, it's amazing. So the garden doesn't feed this many people, but it supplements the food bank that we have here. And then we have a commercial kitchen, and Eliza, mostly Eliza, cans and processes things like soups and salsas and sauces, as well as tinctures and all these things that are available from the gathering place is what it's called. And if you go to the little Timbo gas station or whatever, those products will be in there. And then I think you can order them online. She makes real good elderberry syrup and different things.
Wow.
But there's a food pantry that they started as part of that. And when they started it, Eliza and her husband were driving all around this valley delivering food to families in their own personal trucks. And which is no small feat, because it might be 5 miles, but that takes 30 minutes per family or whatever. But during COVID, the need really blew up, and the resources also really blew up that people had access to. And so we started distributing through the People's Library, set up a drive-through system. And last I checked, I'm sure this isn't the current number, but last I checked, it was up to 465 families.
Oh, wow.
Across 3 counties, and it'll be lined up in front of the People's Library down the highway, at least a half a mile for like sometimes 8 hours. Like,
oh my gosh, it's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a lot of people, and that need is still here. But also, with COVID, I remember saying to Gary, who's our board president and my neighbor, and he's been the board president here since the 80s, like he's been involved for a very long time, and being like, I mean, this is kind of the moment where everything you've been saying since 1980 all of a sudden makes a whole lot of sense.
Right. Yeah.
That we're here to support each other, that there's a way that we can be somewhat, if not entirely, self-sufficient, if we join kind of forces with our talents and our resources. Like so-and-so knows how to grow things, so-and-so knows how to fix things, so-and-so, and we don't. I think it was about 4 months before I really even left.
Wow.
When COVID first hit, and it was like you didn't know.
Right.
It didn't.
Scary.
Yeah, but we were able to kind of support each other. But yeah, it's that kind of which is an Ozark way, right? Like it's the way people are able to stay out here and have been forever. They depend on each other for an exchange of information, knowledge, and resources. And that happens with newcomers, and it happens with generational people. The generational people need the energy of the newcomers, and the newcomers need the knowledge of the generational people. And if you're decent, you'll share those things.
Yeah.
And if you're not, it'll chew you up and spit you out. That's how that Ozarks works.
That's how we want it to work, for sure. So what about you play fiddle for a little band that you just formed it in the last year, right? 2 years, called the Hoe Cakes. You want to tell about that just a little bit, and then probably need to open it up for questions.
All right. We probably got about 10 more minutes on these pies.
Okay.
Yeah, Hoe Cakes is an all-girl string band. It is women from the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks, and we just have a really good time. And
It's you and Allison Williams and
Cindy Wolf.
Cindy. It is Allison though. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, that's great. You guys have done a lot of traveling and played quite a bit together, right?
Well, we haven't done a whole lot. It's still new. We've done some, and it's been really fun. And it's interesting because it's 3 different towns, right? Like
Mhm.
everybody's kind of spread out and all the things. But yeah, it's fun because I had known Cindy for probably 20 years, and I'd known Allison for around that time, and but they had not played and interacted together very much. So yeah, it happened out here. We were doing actually for the People's Library. The first event we actually did do was for the Poor People's Campaign.
Mhm.
We did, it was the first Poor People's Campaign tent revival in the state. And we hosted it in Fox. And they were both here for that, just as visitors and to be supportive. And we all ended up playing in the dorm that evening. And it was like, oh, and Cindy'd been sitting on that name for a while, wanting an all-girl string band.
Yeah.
It just seemed right. So
you play fiddle. What's Cindy? What do they each play?
Cindy plays guitar and banjo and sings, and Allison plays banjo and sings.
Okay. Okay. So I have one more question, since we may go just a tiny bit over, but so within your family or your house now, whatever, do you have any like cooking superstitions, cooking rituals, things that you kind of have to do to make things feel right?
I have a whole thing that I won't go into about my apple pie for contest. Like, it's a scene. It's got to be. I got a whole list of things that
It's working.
It works. Yeah, but it's very involved. And but really, other than that, like I said, I usually get, if it's Thanksgiving or Christmas and I'm cooking all the things, I get my little pictures and my Mimi and my nanny and everybody out and put them on the counter with me. And I always have records, and I love to cook and listen to music at the same time. I have so many things that were those people's. So I'm wearing, right now I'm wearing my granddaddy's butcher apron. This was his knife. I have all sorts of pots and pans. We've talked about this before, that were different, associated with different people that I have cooking memories of. And I usually get all those things out, but I don't have anything that, would make it go wrong, other than like, I know not to try to make the divinity on a day that's humid.
Right, yeah.
little things like that, but I don't do it by moon phase.
Right, yeah, nothing like that.
No.
Yeah. Do you have like a certain apron or anything that you wear every time, or you rotate?
I rotate. I love an apron. I have a whole bunch of aprons, and I was looking today when I was trying to decide what apron to wear, because I have one that was my mama's, which was my mother's mother, my great grandmother on my mother's side. I have this one that was my granddaddy's. I have ones people have made me or given me. They all have something kind of attached with or to them.
Right.
So it is always depending on kind of what I'm cooking, who I feel like connecting with the most. But yeah, every time I cook, no matter what it is, I'm not channeling somebody, but like connecting with somebody.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So does anybody, let me come around. We're going to keep going. We still got 12 minutes left. Okay. I see the comment going all the way back to chicken and dumplings about Steph says that her mom's older sister put frozen peas in their chicken and dumplings. And the thing is, she moved to Michigan after she got married. So yeah, so there's something about the peas and like carrots, maybe some celery in dumplings. It's not my thing. I'm not saying that's what I recommend, but does happen. So does anybody have any questions? I was trying to make it where we can see everybody here. Does anybody have any questions or anything you want to add or say to Rachel? If not, I can probably keep the conversation going for another 10 minutes, but I wanted to give you guys the chance. Nothing. That's radio silence if I ever heard it. Okay, so what have we not talked about as far as, maybe you don't have to make it, but any regional foodways of the Ozarks that we've not talked about that you want to try to highlight?
In terms of holiday food?
It could be holidays or just foodways in general. I'm not picky. We've talked a lot about holiday food.
Yeah, we have talked a lot about holiday food. I don't know. We've been talking a lot about, you and I and the other group, about foraging.
Yeah, foraging. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you forage?
Some, like, it's hard not to out here. You just, after like the more you're here, the more you know.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things, like on my particular place, the lady that lived here before me for any amount of time was identified as a Native American shaman, and she planted all these medicinals on this, but by the time I was here, it had sat vacant for like at least 3 years. And so the forest takes things over really quickly. And so I'm still trying to identify what she planted, but also just like experiencing this place and this land, the places I like to go and walk and swim, and like you start recognizing plants, and then you start recognizing more plants, and then you start asking questions about them and learning more and more and more. And then like the first year I was here, I love mushrooms, and a neighbor came up and was like, "Do you like oyster mushrooms?" I was like, "Those are my favorite mushrooms." And she just like dumped a 5-gallon bucket of them on the porch to get all the bugs off of them. But there's chanterelles, and there's so many things out here.
Lion's mane is one that grows out here too, right?
I haven't seen lion's mane out here.
Okay.
Chicken in the woods I have.
Okay.
And so then I was like, I wonder what a chicken in the woods pot pie would be like.
Yeah.
So it encourages you to kind of experiment with the different things. And then lots of things with elderberry. So like I get the elder flowers every year, and I make, somebody taught me how to make elderflower liqueur, which I don't like all the sugar. So I just soak the flour and always keep that. And then jewel wheat. I mean, there's medicinals and edibles just everywhere out here.
Yeah,
like,
there's lots of broadleaf plantain, right? Isn't that what
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
in your yard?
Yep. Yeah. And Brandon taught me how to just throw all that in the crock pot and make, and so now I feel guilty if I don't and give it to all my friends, because it's literally from my front step.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere. And so, and its qualities are so important. So for snake bites, spider bites, which are things we have to worry about out here, we're an hour away from a hospital or whatever. So like, and there are brown recluse everywhere. So yeah, you just want to learn more. It makes you want to learn more to have that sort of access.
And it really does work. Like those plants and medicines, I kind of tend to be a skeptic a little bit sometimes, and it's really amazing
this
how
is my
well.
jewelweed teacher. Keep going. I keep going.
So what does jewelweed? What's that?
Any kind of bug bite will be good, but especially like poison ivy, which it's everywhere. And so for somebody like me, there's 7 magic swimming holes out here. in the summertime, and like I feel lucky enough, there's also fiber optics out here, so I can do my work, feasibly do my work from a swimming hole.
Right.
Who wouldn't want to do that?
Yeah.
So when I go walking every day in the summer to go do my work in the swimming hole, like I'm gonna get some poison ivy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna, but you figure out how, it's I always talk about the 8 different forms of capital, and like it's a trade-off, right? Like, so yeah, I have to drive, it's 30 minutes to the nearest grocery store,
Right.
or it's an hour to the nearest hospital. But what's that trade-off? Like for me, it all comes out in the wash out to it. I come out ahead to live
Right.
out here in the middle of
Yeah.
nowhere, but
Yeah, no, I can see why you might feel that way. What about, do you do anything with, and this is one that in my learning about Billy Joe, a plant that I've kind of just recently learned about, but a very Ozark plant is apparently spice bush. Do you know anything about spice
I don't.
bush?
Rachel
know
West
much
is on here, and she was
She mentioned it too.
yeah.
I
Rachel, you
remember
need
that.
to jump on and give us she was talking about recipes with spice bush the other day.
I had I'm writing my
Brandon also
dissertation
knows.
about Billy Joe Tatum, who's an Ozark naturalist and writer, and somebody I interviewed, Jim Long, talked a lot about spice bush. If anybody wants to weigh in on that one. There's not purslane out there. Any other things that you can kind of cook with, or?
Well, there's all sorts of greens,
Yeah,
of course, like dandelion greens, and
Mhm.
there's poke, which Cliff Bryan, who is elderly gentleman that I learned a bunch of fiddle tunes from and lived in the Ozarks his whole life, he kept poke berries, and he would freeze them and keep them in the freezer and take like 2 every day for arthritis.
Wow.
Yeah. And I had only known like cooking with the young tender greens before they're super poisonous, in a similar method as you would watercress. So there is watercress out here, which is absolutely delicious if you haven't had that. But we would make a kind of dressing of bacon grease and vinegar and just do kind of a wilted salad situation on that. Both poke and the watercress was how we did it. But yeah.
So do you do any, do you have anything that you grow to make teas, or does anybody do that around here?
All the ladies down here in this valley make Tulsi tea, which is a holy basil tea. I don't grow holy basil, but neighbors, share that with me, which is awesome. Sassafras, but yeah, I don't personally have that practice other than those things. Raspberry leaf, like Eliza will give me raspberry leaf, like if I have cramps or whatever, I can call her, and she's generally got some herbs or things growing if I need them.
Okay, so any other, like, I don't know, any other regional foodways that you love? I mean, it could even be like, a restaurant or thing that we can, or I don't know, anything else.
Yeah, we didn't talk about cannon. We didn't talk about cannon.
Or pickles, or.
Oh, I love to make pickles.
What's I know I really like, or growing up I always liked 14-day pickles, where they're super sweet,
I'm not, the only sweet pickle I like is a bread and butter pickle, and I do those with turmeric and all the things, but I love making dill pickles, and I took a year off from making them because I made so many last year because I was pickling on the halves. So like I would Eliza would provide the cucumbers in jars,
and then I would do the labor and do the other ingredients or whatever. And I don't even know how many quarts, hundreds of quarts
Oh
of,
no.
because I would give her half because
Right.
we had done this thing. And then I had people in my life that loved my pickles. And so it was like, I never had pickles because I was
Always giving
giving away or paying them back or whatever. But, and I love to do beets too.
Yeah.
And my beet recipes is apple cider vinegar and honey and spices. And it's really good. Beets are really hard to grow out here. Any kind of underground,
Yeah.
whatever, is really hard to grow out here. But Aliza usually has beets, beet
Does she
greens
use
or
above
another thing.
ground
Like these. Yeah,
Beds.
yeah.
Oh,
And
I
she's
love
got
it.
hoop
Like
house.
this, Rachel, your jellies.
Oh yeah, I love to make jellies and jams,
Yes.
and I do make those up.
You make those up?
Oh yeah,
What's one that you've made up?
a spiced blackberry jam that's real good, and then I do a raspberry, lavender, and lemon one that I really like.
That sounds good.
We did so
I'm
many.
choking on my spit. I'm choking on my own spit.
So everybody, we're at 4:30, which is our time, and we've done a lot of talking. We're gonna keep going.
Yeah,
I want to keep the Zoom open until we finish this pie,
it's almost done.
and it's close. We still have time. I don't have another engagement for at least an hour. I got one in an hour, but anyway, I just wanted to make sure if anybody was getting ready to log off or had to go before we finish up completely, I just wanted to really, take a minute and say thank you.
Thank you.
And we really appreciate you guys being here. Just you can go back to that registration page, or my email is willette at uark.edu if anybody has any questions or ideas for future Arkansas Folklife web series. I'd love to hear about it. So, but I'm glad you started music again. Sorry, I'm slacking on my music job. Let me see if I got any other. I didn't write enough questions down to fill a full hour and a half. Any other jellies that you have made up?
Well, one of my favorite ones that I started making out here is redbud jelly that I use the Meadowcreek spring water from.
Yeah.
So out here we have an ever-flowing kind of cistern of spring water.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can bottle it in big jars or whatever. So I like to make my jelly with that, of course. But you can take redbud flowers and you make a tea out of that, a super kind of condensed tea, and then make a jelly out of that with some apple juice. And
Wow.
it's very young. I have a quart of it up there right now. The last kind of quart. It's real subtle, kind of real subtle floral flavor, and then it's got the apple in it, so it's a little sweet. But
yeah, that sounds good. What about you do any? My grandma's done strawberry freezer jam for years and years and years, and that usually happens in the spring with fresh strawberries. Of course, do you do freezer jam of any kind?
I don't do a freezer jam. We have a really great strawberry farm by here, in between Shirley and Clinton, Wade Lucas Farms. And so when that comes on, I usually get flats and I make jam and pies. I like to make a strawberry pie with your strawberries, but yeah. But I don't do a freezer jam. I just do a regular jam. I have a copper jam pot. Like, I love to make jam.
Great.
I love to make jam. So,
Are there any special tips or tricks for making jam that you can share?
Not really. I mean, the main thing is getting your jars and everything super sterilized. Like, that's the most important thing. because you don't want to get botulism. And then, I'm assuming everybody that's making jam knows that, like, if you can press your lid and it pops, then you're no good. Don't do it. Yeah.
Okay. So do you have any knowledge about like any rebel canning, any canning that's not like USDA? I don't know if people know what rebel canning is, but I've got this one flower farmer friend who also homesteads from Judsonia. Her name is Kathy Allgood. Not technically the Ozarks, of course, but that's okay. And she does lots of rebel canning, but she won't hardly tell me about any of it because
I don't know this term, but I like it.
It's just when you I love that I've given you
I've got a book called Rebel Homemaking, but it's like more about a philosophy rather than a exact distinction of a technique.
Kathy does not like the term rebel canning because rebel has negative connotations.
Right.
But I really like it because I just sort of picture like old ladies in biker gear like canning on the sly, like black market canning. But
you mean like selling?
Oh no, I mean, but that's just what I picture in my mind. Sorry.
Oh, I see.
It's just canning methods that aren't USDA approved, or when you can something that maybe most people would, or with a method that is a little, a little not by the modern books.
So I'll say this is that
dry canning.
Talking about
So beautiful.
Talking about wild game. So it smells really good. Let it set a little.
Yes, wild game would be
So my favorite way to have venison ever of all time to this day, it lives in my memory and I crave it, was here in Stone County. My mom, her partner at the time, his mother, who was an elderly woman that lived in a cabin with no running water, but this whole idea of not wasting anything, right? So all the deer meat that other people would throw away, like off the legs or arms or ribs or whatever, she would take and she would pressure can that in water. And then she would pour the water off of it and put it in a bowl with flour and salt and pepper and make patties out of it. It just flakes like salmon or tuna or whatever. And she'd make patties of that and fry it in the skillet.
Wow.
And I don't know what about that processing made the meat taste different, but it did. And then it was like crunchy on the outside and almost made its own gravy on the inside. It was just it was like candy. I would take that over tenderloin any day of the week. But yeah, I doubt that was something that was fully sanctioned. Yeah, it's always like weird to like can meat to me. Like I'm also terrified of pressure canners because Hallie Harris Harden, my entire childhood, I would hear her anytime she was canning anything in a pressure cooker. She'd just pace back and forth and she'd be like, you got to pay attention and you got to be careful because if you don't, it's going to explode and that glass is going to hit that ceiling and it's going to come down and it's going to hit you in the eye and then you're going to be blind.
You're going to lose an eye.
You're going to lose an eye. You're going to be burnt and like whatever. So I was always terrified of pressure canning. So that's why I do pickles and jams, right? Like I can't water bath can them.
Right.
I have pressure cooked some beans before, but like you probably won't.
Okay, so give us the rundown one more time on just exactly what these pies are, and then we're gonna cut one and say goodbye.
These pies are a roasted sweet potato pie on the bottom, and then they're pecan pie on top. And we cooked it if you joined us late in a 2-part process. So
yeah, she's made this whole pie while talking.
Ideally, you would let it cool down all the way for it to set up exactly right, but
I guess we're gonna take
We
one of
don't have
these
that
to
time.
community scholars too. Or we could.
We could. They have Halloween treats. We
It's
had a
up to you.
Halloween party at the People's Library.
Yeah, I saw social media photos. It looked really good.
It was really fun, but we had bagged up treat bags and there were leftovers, and so y'all have popcorn balls and
Oh,
treat bags.
good. Oh, it is. It's not as pretty because it's not cutting as pretty. And I think it looks pretty. I still want to eat it, but I know if it's set, it would stay.
Yeah, it would stay better, but
Y'all can't see me. I'm over here clapping.
I hate y'all aren't here.
Yeah, we need everybody here in person. Oh, that's so pretty.
Oh.
I'm gonna hold the plate up close. Look, doesn't that look good? I'm so excited. Pecan pie is my favorite, besides I guess coconut. So I'm really excited. Okay, so here I'm gonna come around, take a bite.
Okay.
And then we'll say bye. I'll make everybody jealous.
It's so good to see so many friends on here.
Yes, and then now we'll put this on YouTube. Hopefully soon. I'm gonna try to get it up as soon as I can. I tend to be a little slow. Oh my gosh.
It's really
I can
hot.
tell from here.
But it's really good.
Mm.
Oh, I might like this better than just pecan.
Right?
Right.
Granddad was on to something.
Okay, so I'm gonna enter this one in. I just learned that the longest continuous pie contest in Arkansas is a sweet potato pie contest.
Oh,
That happens next month. I'm thinking
you should
I
do
have
it.
been encouraged to enter this with real crust. not-
Oh, really good. Okay, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Make it where my